Hello, Steve White, TrekBoy89 for Steve Arts 89. Well, it's the 50th anniversary of Star Trek, but it's the 60th anniversary of The Cage. The Cage, of course, was the pilot episode, the beginning. Gene's really original, pure version of Star Trek before Star Trek the Motion Picture. There's a bit of confusion with this pilot. Some people refer to it as a failed pilot, which is really annoying because clearly if the pilot had failed, there would be no Star Trek, you idiots. It clearly sold the series, but they did want changes. They got rid of a bunch of things. They changed Spock. They got rid of number one, and they were going to go forward. But then the only thing they did like, which was Jeffrey Hunter's portrayal of Christopher Pike, was gone. They lost. The actor basically decided he didn't want to do the series. So what they were left with, they weren't happy with. So whether they asked for another pilot or whether Desilu suggested another pilot, either way, they did another pilot because they were sold on the idea of Star Trek, but the specifics, there are issues. They got rid of the things that they weren't happy with, and then one thing they liked left, and they were left with nothing they were really happy with other than the idea of Star Trek. So Gene basically reworked it. He created Captain Kirk, and some of the other actors also from The Cage were apparently, this is from an interview from the Yeoman. Apparently they were all with the same talent agent. So when Jeffrey left, apparently her contract went as well. So I think at least one of the other actors left when Jeffrey left, and the company that was representing them wasn't negotiating his contract anymore. So they basically had to recast and just find a whole new cast for the most part. The only one they were left with was Leonard Nimoy. And then he was given the attributes that number one had, because he wasn't an emotionless alien in the original pilot, but they did make the Vulcans into a race that controlled their emotions. And there's a fair amount of confusion now when people view The Cage and they don't understand why Spock does have emotions. He's not a extremely emotional alien or anything. He's just reacting emotionally like everyone else, all the other actors and all the other characters, because the Vulcans hadn't been developed yet. And some people try and argue that that's canon or not canon, but the reality is they were developing the show. Once things are established, they're canon. When they're being developed, you can't go back and say, well, before this was developed, it was this, so we can say that was canon and do that. No, it just doesn't work that way. They established what the Vulcans were. That doesn't change once it's established. But in the initial creation, in the first couple of episodes of the show, maybe even the first season, when things are being established, they're going to fluctuate. But once they're established, that's canon. So, so the pilot is a very simple story, but it's amazing, and it's even more relevant today than it was when it was created in 1964. And that's the amazing thing. I just watched it again, and it is so much more relevant now today with AI and virtual reality and Unreal reality series and social media, and just the way society now is living in this sort of fake bubble. Everyone's in their own little bubbles, looking out at all these fake sort of realities that they're investing in and believing in, which is something they couldn't really have envisioned back in 1964. But in the story, Captain Pike is tired and he kind of wants an escape from being a captain, responsibility, and all the things that have happened with exploring other planets and dealing with other races and so forth. And his doctor says, no, you wouldn't like that. Basically, that's just death. Really, that's just death. And eventually he gets put in a situation where he gets everything he wanted. He gets kidnapped by aliens and paired with a beautiful woman and he has the potential of living in a fantasy world where everything he thinks can be real, everything he imagined and yearned for and missed or longed for, he could have. And then he finds that it's not real, it's fake, it's empty, and it's not living. And he learns that lesson. He saves the day. And eventually they reveal that because there's a group of, in case you haven't seen the episode, there's a bunch of explorers who've crashed on a planet. They're found alive and well. One of them has a daughter who's very young and beautiful, and eventually you discover that she is the only one who survived. Everyone else is dead. They're all illusions. They're all holograms, and she was severely damaged and injured and doesn't want to return to the real life, to the real world, to Earth. So they allow her to stay and live in this illusion because that is better for her, or she prefers that or wants that. And Pike returns to, the Enterprise and the real world and reality. Partly because number one decided to set off a force chamber reaction in the phaser, basically saying we'd rather die than be kept here as slaves living in an illusion. So the Talosians realise we can't use these aliens, they're not the solution to our problem, and they let them go and they let her stay. And it's a great episode. It's well produced. Some people, because they're not very sophisticated, they can't, they're not familiar with 1960s TV productions and so forth, and theatre and all the things that came before, Star Trek in 1966. They have trouble really appreciating it and seeing it in the context it should be seen. But even in today's context, it's still brilliant, and it's still amazing, and it's still, like I said, more relevant today than it was then, and will continue to be relevant because Dean was just forward thinking. And I like the production. It's funny to I recently watched Forbidden Planet, and you can see some elements there, and it really is a great production. It really is a great show. The actors are great. Suzanne Oliver is amazing. Jeffrey Hunter is amazing. Everyone else is great. Aside from John Hoyt's hair, was it John Hoyt? I've forgotten his name. The Doctor. Aside from HD not being very kind to his comb over, overall the show is pretty amazing, and I love it. And I find myself quoting all the lines while I'm watching it because I've watched it so many times, and I enjoy it every time. And that's a mark of a great show, and a great creator and a great writer. And I have a few little Pikes, of course. I have my little 6-inch Pike on his captain's chair, although I have removed the little thing on the side, so it looks more like the one in the original series. And of course, my little Playmates Pike, and of course the bigger Playmates Pike as well. And of course, Pike was in the movie, and I think the saddest thing about this was because the Pike in the Abrams movies was actually good. I liked the actor, I liked the character, it was fine. It was a separate universe, separate timeline, everything was fine. But I am disappointed, and have become increasingly disappointed with Anson Mount's Captain Pike. They've made him into a bit of a joke, particularly with the Vulcan hairdo that apparently was Anson Mount's idea. It's not something a hairdresser or designer or producer or some random person did to him. That was his idea. But when I was watching the end of the series, I was really mourning the series that we could have had after this, with Captain Pike and this love triangle between these two women who both had different ideas of him and attraction to him, and the younger was it Ensign, or I can't remember his rank. There's the younger guy and the Doctor, and I just thought this could have been an interesting series, and I would love to have seen a Captain Pike series, and we never got that because Strange New Worlds is some strange amalgamation. The only thing they got right was number one. They did a good job with her, but everything else, they changed everything else. They changed Pike, they got rid of all the other characters, and then they're just trying to bring in all the elements from Star Trek, the original series that we're already familiar with, and re-envision them and rework them and reuse them, instead of, actually taking the characters from the cage that didn't really get a chance to get a series and get real life as characters and a history, and really just expand on that and explore that and create new things within that. Instead, they just sort of keep looking forward to Star Trek and the beginning of that 5-year mission, and we never seem to really be getting the Pike series that we should have gotten. So, yes, so The Cage is amazing. The Cage is brilliant. I love it. And even though, it does have some flaws, looking at it from the perspective of now as a 1964 TV pilot, there's a few things, of course. Some things are misrepresented, like the way that all the men look at Vina when they first see her. It's not just that she's young and beautiful, it's also she's the only real being there. Everything else is holograms and fake, and on some level I think they know that. And they respond to her not just because she's young and attractive, but also because she's the only real creature there, and she's the one who's actually creating all of it and generating all of it. So there's little things. I could do a more in-depth analysis of the actual story, which I might do one day for the fun of it. Maybe for the 60th anniversary, I might do all the episodes and try and look at the production and do a scripted, proper sort of video on each one. I'm thinking of doing that, but it may take 2 years to do all 80 episodes. But I'm going to go. Feel free to share, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you think. Love the show. Wish we'd gotten a Pike series, which sadly is not what Strange New Worlds turned out to be. It's more of a parody of the original series set in Pike's time with Pike instead of Kirk, because they could easier to redo Pike than Kirk. So yeah, a little sad that we didn't get the Pike series, but still I love the pilot and I'm always going to love it.